Hello, welcome. My name is Margie Adler, and I'm Managing Director of Alumni Relations here at Yale SOM, and I am thrilled to be one of the first to welcome you to the Yale School of Management. You are beginning an amazing journey with your wonderful classmates, and you're also joining a community for life, the SOM alumni community. You'll find that at important moments in your life, SOM alumni will be there for you, and this community, including the Alumni Relations team, will continue to serve as a resource for you for years and decades to come. It's now my pleasure to introduce you to an amazing member of this larger community, an alum who truly embodies the school's mission to educate leaders for business and society. Judith Scimone received an MBA from SOM in 2000. Judith currently serves as Senior Vice President, Chief Talent Officer for MetLife. Her experience spans multiple industries, geographies, and functional areas. Prior to joining MetLife, Judith has held talent management, HR, diversity inclusion, and consulting roles at Google, Johnson & Johnson, Motorola, Bank of America, JPMorgan Chase, and Hewitt Associates. She began her career as a mechanical engineer at General Electric. Judith has lived in the US, Latin America, and Asia Pacific. Before I turn it over to Judith, I just want to mention that there will be some time for follow-up questions for Judith after her talk. So as you think of questions for her, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions. So without any further delay, please join me in welcoming Judith Scimone.
Thank you, Margie. And thanks to all of you for having me. I'm so delighted to welcome you all. And just to recognize the impressive portfolio of learning programs you represent, the MBA, the master's program. I mean, it's the master's programs, it's just amazing. You know, in preparing for this talk, I've spent a lot of time reflecting back to 22 years ago. Yes, 22 years ago, when I was sitting in orientation at Yale SOM. Though it seemed, sometimes it seems like yesterday, August of 1998 was a long time ago. iPhones weren't even around. And anyone with a cell phone only used it to make and receive calls. Imagine that. We hailed taxis from street corners. We thought Amazon would be the biggest online bookstore ever, never even conceiving of its current prowess in consumer services. Google hadn't even been founded yet. I think it was founded later that year. It was so long ago, in fact, that Yale SOM had yet to graduate a class, a master's degree in public and private management, the MPPM. So yeah, it was a while ago, but now here we are, having advanced so rapidly into a digital, accessible world that enables me to welcome you to Yale SOM in this completely virtual environment, even during a global pandemic that has many of us quarantined in our homes. Welcome to my kitchen, by the way. I realize that this is anything but usual and may not be a welcome alternative to being in the same room together and breaking bread together. But I can't help but be in awe of the fact that this type of orientation is even possible. And I, for one, I'm really grateful. I feel nothing but admiration and nothing but respect for the genius and innovation that made this event a feasible reality. Now, looking back, making the decision to come to SOM, it was an easy one for me. I considered a number of schools, and SOM had the obvious: strong reputation, academic excellence, impressive students. But you know what really resonated with me is that in SOM, I found a socially conscious institution and classmates who were drawn to each other's desire to make a real difference, and not just for themselves. And when you think about the broader Yale University and community, it provided this learning environment that brought together the best and most beautiful elements of our society, at least in my opinion. When I arrived at orientation, my heart held a mix of emotion. First, I was in a state of wonder, pure and simple. I was at Yale. I must have visited every building on campus at the time, reflecting on learning, decisions, advancements, all that was born there over the centuries. I really wanted to experience the university. Second, I felt humbled and privileged. It wasn't lost on me how many others had dreamed of that moment, of a moment like the one I was about to experience and experiencing right then. And I also couldn't forget the countless other people who'd sacrificed so much for me to get there. Those closest to me being my parents, of course, and family. And then there were those I had never met who fought long and tirelessly for equality and helped someone like me to secure access to higher education. Lastly, I'll admit, I was nervous. I was really nervous. Every ounce of self-doubt revealed itself as I sat. Orientation at that time was I was sitting in the middle of the lecture hall. I looked at the folks around me. I saw many people who looked different, came from different backgrounds, had different experiences. I also assumed that everyone was better off than me, which was a pretty safe assumption since I was practically broke at the time and putting everything into this education. But seriously, I thought about where everyone had been, what they'd done, and I couldn't help but compare myself. One question kept going through my head, and that question was, do I really belong here? Which brings me to the concept I want to focus on today, belonging. I'm going to be talking a bit about belonging as it pertains to mine and your experience at SOM. When I think about this week's theme of holistic diversity, it seems fitting to focus on belonging, something that's so essential to achieving true diversity and inclusion. Now, it's kind of important that we're on the same page about what belonging means, at least for this conversation. Often we confuse belonging with fitting in. And I think Brené Brown stated it perfectly when she said, and I'll read it, fitting in and belonging are not the same thing. In fact, fitting in is one of the greatest barriers to belonging. Fitting in is about assessing a situation and becoming who you need to be in order to be accepted. Belonging, on the other hand, doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are. I found that really powerful. And then it leads me to a question. So what can each of you do to bring that kind of sense of belonging to life for yourself and your SOM community? Well, to help you out, I'll share a little bit of what I learned 20 plus years ago. First, I want you to recognize that you absolutely, without question, belong here. I speak first to those of you who may, as I did, question whether or not you were meant to be here. And let me be clear, not only do you belong here, but Yale needs you, SOM needs you, the world needs you. And I hope that doesn't sound corny, because I actually believe that with all my heart. I know the impact that an SOM alum can have on the world, having seen it with my classmates over the past 20 years. And now more than ever, the world needs leaders who will stand for what's right, who will build and nurture our global community. Our leaders are called at this moment to drive positive change, enhance personal freedom, and spread empowerment. You're likely here because you want to be a part of that movement. So yes, you're in the right place. And yes, SOM is fortunate to have found you. Don't question that for a moment. I've also learned that belonging requires a meaningful connection, that connection between your authentic self and the same in others. So while at SOM, strive to bring this authenticity forward. Listen, you all bring stellar academic credentials, impressive experiences, clever points of view. And in this setting, it's often easy and maybe even tempting to connect solely on those resume factors, forming your learning groups and social relationships with others who share your personal and professional interests. But I invite you to go deeper. Have the real conversations. Get to know each other beyond the resume surface. When you make introductions this week and over the course of the next month or so, share who you are, not just what you do. Talk about the significant roles you play in the world, be they as parents, siblings, friends. Talk about what you're most proud of, what you're least proud of, what excites you, what absolutely bores you. Share your ambitions and dreams, and even your fears. Allow yourself to be vulnerable and open up your true self to those around you. You might take this for granted, but I ask you to realize that it's you, the real, deeply human and imperfect you, that your classmates want to meet and they want to form those lasting relationships with. So being your true self and will connect you with this moment and to each other. And I hope you know that your whole self is welcome and valued here. You know, when it comes to achieving a sense of belonging, I've also learned that it requires you to be fully present. Again, during your time at SOM, it would be so easy to put your head down and focus solely on grades and getting jobs. Now, don't get it twisted. Those are important outcomes. Even so, I ask that you seek much more from this time. Don't allow this experience to amount to a continuous series of job interviews. It's about so much more than that. It's about expanding perspective by learning from and with other brilliant minds. It's about building quality and lasting connections. It's about taking on new challenges, exploring new territory, curating new dreams for yourself and your family. And so I encourage you to be here, fully here in the now, and an active participant along this journey. So in addition to requiring me to be my authentic self and to remain fully present, I also learned that belonging required me to give of myself. I'll share a bit about that. So, a friend of mine used to always remind me, when you see a hole, plant a seed. Well, in 1999, an SOM classmate of mine, Nadia, and I saw the opportunity to improve the representation of Black students in the program. We love this school, and we wanted more Black leaders to experience it. So we started the Black Business Alliance. Now, back in that day, there were only a handful of Black students. So the BBA was bolstered by a multitude of non-Black classmates who cared about and supported our mission. The action of those allies served not only to keep the BBA alive, to be honest with you, it was such a strong demonstration to us that we belong there. Founding the BBA was a turning point for me at SOM, I must say. It was a chance to affirm the importance of having more diversity at SOM and that being appreciated, but also it was a chance to be a part of the solution. Creating something that could have a meaningful impact on the institution's future helped me to feel closer to the school, like I was part of it. In giving back, I really found my place. I knew that I would gain a lot from going to SOM, but I hadn't really thought about how much I would help shape SOM until Nadia and I launched BBA. All that being said, I encourage you to think now about the many ways in which you can leave this place just a little better than you found it. In this day and age, there are so many things that have the potential to pull us apart. A global pandemic, issues related to racial injustice, national elections, you name it. Which everyone feels that they belong, it will require intentionality. The good news is that you're in the perfect place at the perfect time to act with purpose. Being at SOM surrounds you with diversity, open-minded thinkers, stimulating learning environment. It's a perfect place to practice inclusion and belonging. While you pursue these academic and career goals, it's actually the perfect time to do the deeper personal work required to emerge as an inclusive leader. And now I can share with you with confidence that this intentional focus will not only serve you well over the next few years, but for many years to come. As I heard Margie mention before, the people who you meet here become a part of your life, for life. Quite honestly, even those you don't know here, you'll feel a kinship with when you go back out into the world. And you'll find yourself searching for each other and to try to connect with each other no matter where you go. Looking back, I realized that achieving that sense of belonging at SOM, it was actually simpler than I thought. All that was required was for me, the real me, to show up and engage in real conversations, to be fully present and to give of myself. And also, it required me to believe that I belonged there and help others to feel the same. My hope is that you all recognize that you don't just belong at SOM, you are SOM. I hope that this journey brings you self-discovery, meaningful connection, and just amazing memories. I wish you all the best. Thank you.
From your experience, Judith, what makes SOM students unique to employers these days?
Wow, that's a great question. I would say that there is something pretty consistent when you meet someone from SOM, and I would say it's the well-roundedness. It's this this business savvy mixed with social consciousness, as I mentioned before, mixed with I think those are the two things, right? You get a really nice combination of a well-rounded leader. someone who cares for humanity as much as they care about profitability. And I think that that is a very attractive, something that's very attractive when employers are looking for people who they can trust with their organization.
Exactly. I fully agree with that. I think that's exactly right. We have another question that's, do you have any suggestions for how to make those kinds of connections with others now that we're in this virtual environment?
Yes, I would say, and this is where that intentionality becomes so important again. My advice is as follows, a couple of things. Think about, first of all, I would really make an effort to meet people that you don't know. And it's actually easier in a virtual environment because guess what? You can set up a Zoom call and say, let's have a virtual coffee. Whereas it might seem intrusive in a non-virtual environment, or it's harder to schedule. But I would say one thing is just very simple. Continually question yourself. Am I expanding my network while I'm here? Is everyone around me like me? Or have I met someone from a different country, from a different industry? And every few weeks, just ask yourself that question. And then if the answer is no, find somebody and meet them. And don't underestimate, we're all human. We all want to connect. Sometimes it's hard and you assume this is going to be kind of weird if I reach out to somebody and just say, hey, let's connect. It won't be. Most of your learning will happen through those connections. You'll learn a lot in the classroom, don't get me wrong, but most of your learning will happen through those connections, and most of that learning will be lifetime because you'll just never stop connecting with those people. So encourage you to just don't make too much of it. Invite somebody to break bread with you virtually.
Right, great, thank you. Another question about the university and how connected did you feel with non-SOM, I guess, students and alumni?
It's a great question. I felt pretty connected, but I would say that I found ways to connect myself. Again, that was something I was working on personally. Like, how do I just become more, it had nothing to do with being, well, it might have had something to do with being introverted, but I also knew that I was more a one-on-one connector than a group connector. And so I did a couple of things. One is, find, and you can find them now and you can attend them, online virtual events. And if somebody says something or does something that touches you, reach out to them. You might attend an online seminar at one of the other colleges, and now you can actually do that. Before you had to worry about seating. So I think take advantage of those opportunities for sure. That was the one that comes to mind though. I'll stop there.
Another question back to SOM is one thing that sort of permeates everything about SOM is the mission to educate leaders for business and society. And so one of the questions is, how has that mission impacted you post-graduation?
Yeah, I take that with me. It's funny. I had a lot of friends in different business schools when I was at SOM, and I remember some friends from schools I will not name would refer to us as the tree huggers, because we were very into the environment, right? Or some other interesting names. And I remember being very proud of that. And proud before it was popular. And that's one of the things that I thought that I'd like to share. That SOM's mission was its mission before it was popular. It was now you hear it much more often. So I just wanted to point that out. But what I will say is, since I've graduated, it's really helped to further shape and align with my values. And one of my core values is around responsibility. Responsibility to others, responsibility to the earth, responsibility to myself. And I think one of the things that I've lived by is that responsibility. And it was at SOM that I got the perspective around the many places that I could live into that responsibility and the many ways in a business environment that I could live into that responsibility. And I've taken that with me since graduation.
Great, thank you. Back to your involvement with the BBA, do you have any advice for students who want to create a club and how to make it work and how to make it last?
I have to go back in the memory banks for that one. I would say a couple of things were important. You probably recall I talked about allies. Although you're forming a club, I will say the beautiful thing about a club, and I would imagine they would be virtual clubs, is that they can be open. And so I would say a couple of things. One is first of all, have a clear mission. What are you playing for? In this case, we were saying we want more diverse. We actually want to have all diverse students, particularly Black students, to experience the Yale that we experience, the SOM that we experience. Second, to that point around allies, be open and inclusive as you create a club. It's really easy to actually become more exclusive when you create a club. But I think the beauty of the club was that everyone was open, and it really depended on the support of our allies to make it happen. And that is really what kept us alive, is that we were here, we had a clear mission, and we invited others to join us, and they signed on. And it worked out really well. And I'm so excited that BBA still exists. You have no idea. That is, I met someone the other day who said, yeah, we're still going. I was tickled, truly honored.
Great, thank you. That's great advice. We have a few questions about your career. One question is we talked about how you've been in different industries and you've served in different functional roles. How did you know when it was ready to move on and where to go to next?
Sure, it's a great question. That's always an easier one to answer in hindsight. I'm not sure I really knew at the time. I'm not sure I really knew, but I knew what questions I needed to answer for myself. So I got some really good advice early on from a person who ran HR, ran HR at a large company. And the advice was that you can experience something like HR in different contexts. And the more contexts you experience HR in, the more well-rounded a leader you are. And for me, that was important. So I fashioned my career after different experiences that would help me see HR in a developed market, HR in an emerging market, HR in a turnaround company, HR in more of a startup company. That was really important to me. That might not be important to everyone, but if I tell you what my truth is, I was really looking for I've experienced it enough, this context, what else do I need to learn? And I always just felt it, like it's time. I've done all I need to do here or in this role, not even necessarily changing companies, but knowing when that cycle of success was complete and saying, okay, I'm getting too comfortable. It's time to make myself uncomfortable and learn more.
Thank you. Another question now about if you have any reflections that you can share on the current BLM movement, sort of in the context of what you were thinking about while you were at SOM and kind of how you think about it now, and whether or not you think there's any role for students at SOM in terms of, contributing to social change.
So do I think there's a role? There's always a role, especially if you see the need for change. Then yes, I absolutely, getting back to that value of responsibility, when you see the need for change, yes, it's actually, I do feel strongly that it's your responsibility to help ignite that change. Specific to BLM movement, I remember, I would say that there weren't a lot of climate issues that inspired BBA. It was an issue of there was not critical mass. And so at the time, the climate was very positive. There were a lot of people who are saying the same thing, quite honestly, Black students and non-Black students. And so seeing that, when I look back, I wouldn't say that there was anything in the climate that inspired inspired BBA. It was more the opportunity. It was more, we all want to learn from a variety of people, a diversity of people, and we just don't have the critical mass that we think we should. Fast forward to today, I think what I'm encouraged by, if I go back to the past, I will say that what was going on in maybe not Yale, but probably New Haven a little bit differently than others around me. And so that was a factor in thinking about, we're experiencing things a little bit differently when we go places, when we shop, when we, in our neighborhoods. So we experience things differently than our classmates. And so there were some environmental issues that inspired us to say, it's time, we need a larger community. Now, when I fast forward, I would say what a unique time now is to bring in those authentic conversations into a place like Yale SOM. So it's not every day. In our everyday lives, you might not be surrounded by such a diversity of people, right? Where you can actually have the real conversations that actually drive social change, because you're in an environment where you can actually make that happen. In our day-to-day lives, maybe not our work lives, but at home or in your social circles, you don't have that same level of diversity. So I think starting there would be a helpful place. And then thinking about what change you want to see in the world, and having your platform be where you are now at one of the finest institutions in the world is a beautiful thing.
Great, thank you. So powerful. Another question is about, given your HR background, if you have any tips for women in particular who want to pursue higher positions in a company, and how you've gone about that in your career and how you've seen that work out throughout your roles.
Yeah. My advice would be a couple of things. There's so much advice. Where would I start? One of the more powerful things I would say that it's important to have are both mentors and sponsors. Mentors being a diverse group of people around you who you can go to, who help you work on things that you're trying to develop. But you also need sponsors. Wherever you are, you need people in the organization who are in a position to make decisions about you and your career, and who know who you are and can advocate for you. I would say what I've learned is women, people of color, tend not to have sponsors as much as they do mentors. So I'd encourage you to think about that. Like, who are my sponsors? I would also say, it gets to what I talked about with belonging, but it applies here too. You are not going to, a lot of times we try to put on, as women, we may try to put on things that are, traits and behaviors, et cetera, that make us fit in to what might be, in some cases, a male-dominated business situation. The real you is probably the best you. And I would say, as much as you can, try to connect with her. Try to be really authentic and real, because your best you is your real you. It's not the person you're trying to be to fit in. And I hear a lot. I've often met women in the workplace, outside of the workplace, and I've seen people who are completely different leaders outside of the workplace and actually much more effective because they were being their authentic selves. I don't mean to imply that as women we're walking around faking it. I don't mean to imply that at all. I just mean that there is a part of you that you seem to take off to try to fit in. Once you step in the workplace, I encourage you not to do that. I encourage you to bring that person who you are, that amazing woman who you are, to the workplace in the fullest. And I think you'd be surprised. So I'll leave it at those two things.
So true, and I think that that's also sort of universal as well. A few more questions that are not necessarily SOM focused, but more about your personal thoughts. Do you have some thoughts on how you go about tackling big challenges? So, maybe while you were at SOM or during your career, how do you go about that?
First, trying to think of a big challenge. In most cases, my framework is first, believe that you can. Just, you got what you pretty much, I usually say, I know I have what I need or I can access what I need to solve this. Second, no, I've always leaned on the advice of people wiser. So it's know that I can figure it out with help. And I had the resources being help. I've actually never tackled a big problem without reaching far and wide for potential solutions. Even sometimes to SOM alum, in my current workplace or elsewhere. It's always helpful to just get different perspectives. Any big challenge requires a number of perspectives to get the answer to. And then act boldly. Don't be afraid to fail. I'm not afraid. I always think about, I'm not that afraid to fail. I always think about what's the worst that can happen. I obsess about it, and then I go, it probably won't happen. Let's go. Let's give it a try. And I know that I'm agile enough to recover if I start to fail. And so I think those have been things that when I tackle a challenge, just have some confidence, reach out far and wide for advice, and then go for it without the fear of making a mistake. Have been three things that have been consistent, personally and professionally.
Great, thank you. So a little bit on the lighter side, I think we have several questions about what was your favorite thing about SOM and what was your favorite thing about being in New Haven?
Pizza.
There's another question about what your favorite pizza is too. That's also coming up.
Pizza. Yes, it's funny. So one of my favorite things about SOM, and I didn't mention this earlier, was when I did my internship, I got really lucky, and I went to P&G, and the CEO of P&G at the time was coming back. He's a Yale alum, John Pepper. He was coming to SOM to teach a class the next year, and so I was at P&G along with another SOMer, and he asked us to be his teaching assistants. And I went, this is great. I'm going to be the teaching assistant for this CEO, this sitting CEO of a pretty large company that I respect. And it was, of course, on leadership and ethics. And I have to tell you, that was dealing with this leader was one of the funnest parts of being at SOM. One, because he liked pizza. And so we didn't go to the Omni Hotel. We went to Pepe's to have our sessions, which was great. And I'm sorry if you're going to miss out on that. Hopefully not for too long, because it's great pizza. But two, he was just another example. So again, this consistent thing you see, and I guess it's not just SOM, it's Yale, of people who come out of this environment and really just want to do good. So he came back and was talking about ethics and leadership and decision making. And I was just so inspired by him that it was one of my favorite times. Honestly, that was my favorite semester. So anyway, and then of course, food. I love food. And so I enjoyed the food, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, and there's great food in New Haven too. And I think that that's a great example of what you were talking about before in terms of just making connections and, you know, not just with the people who are like you, but also with people who are teaching you and with faculty members and with other people in the community, and how rich and fulfilling that can be as well.
It really is. It really is.
Another even more personal question. We read in your bio that you are a frequent motorcycle rider, passenger. And so there were a couple questions about how that got started, where do you go, and, you know, do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I just bought my own Harley a few weeks ago. So I'm definitely now a rider, which is awesome. Yeah, my husband, let's start with my husband. My husband, he's been riding for, you know, ever. And we ride everywhere. So we're on 2 wheels much more than we're on 4 wheels. So we have, we ride across country a lot. We ride across different countries a lot. Those are the 2 things I do everywhere I go. We usually take a long motorcycle ride, and I love to cook. So what I love about motorcycles is I like that there are no barriers between me and nature, and I do like that people are accessible. When you stop, you can say hi, you can talk to people. I love it. So that's what motorcycles mean for me. I have no idea. I've been the passenger a lot more than I've been the rider. So, but I'm on the road now, so watch out. If you're in the Northeast, watch out.
Great. So I think we have time for maybe a couple more questions. Yeah, so here's a good one. What is your personal mission and what legacy do you want to leave behind?
Honestly, so my personal mission is, I don't know if it's a mission, but it's what I strive for every day. And so it might seem small, but every day I strive to be a blessing to someone. That's it, every single day of my life. And I'm on that mission. And if it's like, because it gets me, it helps me not to be so focused on me. It's like, who can I be a blessing to? Who have I tried to be a blessing to today is something that I think about every single day. And the second part of the question?
What legacy would you want to leave?
I want to leave a legacy of, there are a couple of things that are important to me. And the word that comes to mind is access. I want to leave a legacy where people feel, where more and more people have access to education, to financial well-being, I'm in the business of creating access to information. I don't know how to articulate what that legacy is specifically, Margie, but I know that it's along those lines. I'll tell you when I grow up, I'll be able to articulate it.
That's great, and you're obviously well on the way with both of those things. So that's really amazing. I think we're about at time now. I just want to thank you again so much. This has been really so wonderful for us all to get to know you better and to hear more about SOM. And you've been an inspiration for me, and I think for everyone else who's been listening. So thank you again for that. And I hope to hear much more from you over the next several months and years that all of these new students will be on campus. And again, welcome to you all for to SOM, and thank you again for being here with us. And thank you again, Judith. So I think Dean's Scully is going to, yes, Dean Scully is going to have a few words. And yes. So thank you again, everyone.
Thank you. And Judith, I'd like to thank you as well. It was incredible. Absolutely incredible. Can I ask one question, since I'd love to use to ask you one final question from me, because you and I talked about this a little bit earlier in the summer, and a question came up in the chat that we weren't able to get to, but what impact did your SOM classmates have on you through the years? Now you have a great perspective, right, of 20 years of classmates at large out in the world, and what impact did they have on you professionally, personally, anything you care to talk about? I'd love to end with that.
No, you're going to make me cry. It's amazing. So I would say that what happens is, and I really mean this, you're a community for life. So over 20 years, you go through a lot of stuff, joys, sorrows, everything. And your community is there with you. And, there have been friends who've been with me through the worst and the best over the past 20 years from SOM. And I'm grateful. Just the other day I remember at Google and now at MetLife, you find each other. We just had this call across SOMers across the globe who we just got on a call and said, let's get to know each other. And I tell you, it was as if none of us graduated the same year. It was as if we'd known each other our whole lives. Mm-hmm. So there's just something about the SOM community that connects you. And it's really hard to articulate, but I know you'll feel it once you get to know each other and once you get to know other SOMers. And I'm excited for you already because the newness of it was the best part. And so, but I will say that, yes, it starts here, but here we are 22 years later, and it's as strong as ever and a bigger network.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear. And I'm glad that it's incredible feeling over time to understand what it means to be part of this community today. And for PhD students, today is their first day, but you're 20 years from today. Mm-hmm. And that your network has expanded and been so rich for you over time. It's just quite incredible and impactful. So thank you. From all of us, over the well over 400 people who listen to you in real time, and then our other students who are going to be listening to a recording of this, we really profoundly thank you for your time and everything that you've done, and hope to connect in other ways this year. So, absolutely. All right, thank you. Yeah. Okay, students, I'm going to do a 2 minutes of housekeeping. So at 1:10, there's another session for you today. This is reflections with your orientation leaders. It's just students with students together. It's optional, but I think it'd be wonderful if you can fit this into your day to have that. And then there's, of course, other programming later in the day that the orientation leaders are putting on for you later in the evening time in the East Coast where we are, but at different times around the world. So housekeeping is very quick. It's just there's an optional event run by your orientation leaders, only student zone at 1:10 this afternoon, and then another later in the day time to get to connect, reflect, get to know each other, and listen to each other's voices. Really start initiating those friendships that Judith and others have talked about with you. This is a impactful time, and we're trying to give you as many opportunities as we can to have you dive into that with each other. And then the next time you'll see me is tomorrow morning for an overview, and then we go right into tomorrow's programming. So from all of us here, from my team and everyone who's spoken today, we want to thank you, and you have a quick break. And then those of you who are joining your orientation leaders, the timing for that is in about 10 minutes from now. So thanks so much. Bye-bye.